To adjust the tappets, in the old days, I just used a 1/2-inch ring spanner and a decent screwdriver. But these days, I tend to prefer using a 1/2-inch offset spanner. That makes it much easier. I also always wear thick rubber gloves because it's very easy to tear your hands up on those rocker tops. There are various ways to adjust the tappets. Some people put a big nut on the end of the pulley at the front. There is another way to do it that I used to do in the old days. I used to put a nut, apologies, that should be a socket on the pulley on the alternator. On the alternator, sometimes I still grab the fan belt and yank the fan belt. That is quite hard work, and you can catch your hand on a fan if you're not careful. However, the way that I prefer to do it now is to take all the plugs out, take the handbrake off, put it in gear 4, and I just literally push the car backwards and the rockers will move as the car moves. Just takes a little bit of effort, and to do the whole sequence, the car only moves back between 1 to 2 feet. So it's not very far, and that's the way I prefer to do it now. Now I believe there is still a tool you can get to help you with this called Gunson's Click Adjust. These things were around 30 years ago, and I bought one 30 years ago for my previous vehicles. However, I didn't get on with it. I found it quite difficult to use, and I was never happy about using it. And in the end, I just ended up not using it. In fact, I think I still got mine in my old toolbox. Let me have a look. Here it is. One old Click Adjust. 30 years it's been in this box, unused. So there's always the old question, do I set them to 15 cold? Do I set them to 13 hot? Should I set them to something else? There's all sorts of different answers for the standard engine. Yeah, these things are 50, 60 years old now, some of them, so there can be a lot of wear. And how do you decide? There's all sorts of people giving you all sorts of advice on YouTube. So I think basically it comes down to you and your car. If you set your car to the standard 15 thou cold and it's making a right old din that really is horrible, you might need to take them down a little bit. What I'm going to show you is some information that I wrote down 30 years ago when I went through all this with previous cars. October 1990, rang MGOC to inquire about tappet clearance for an MGB. The mechanic I spoke to said they set all theirs to 12 thou gap. He said no harm would come to the valves. So I set them to 12 thou, and apparently it was quieter back then. I also rang after that a company called Mech Spec, which some of you may remember were a company who built engines near Doncaster, I think. And they told me they set all their tappets to 13 thou because of wear in the rocker gear. And then I've put here, after trying several tappet gaps, 12, 13, 15, the conclusions are, and this is for the car that I had then, a 74 GT, the car is quieter on 13 thou, but seems to struggle just a little bit for power, 3.5 to 4,000 revs per minute, 80 mile an hour. The car seems to breathe easier at 15, but the tappets are noisier. So, pays your money, takes your choice. Does it really matter? Probably not anymore. I don't drive this car like I drove my other car. I rarely get past 60 in this car, so if I set them to 13, it will probably do. However, I think setting the tappets cold to 10, 11 thou, probably be pushing your luck a little bit. 13 you'll be safe, 15 you'll be safe, just depends on how much rattling you're happy to put up with.